And listening to all that is the former Conservative leader and leading Brexit campaigner Ian Duncan-Smith. Welcome to the programme. Do you accept there's a significant chance that the government could be defeated on a customs union in the House of Commons?
You know, when you don't have a majority, there's a significant chance you can be defeated on anything, frankly. So let's just kind of... I do love the way the media looks at this. Take a pace back. It's a government that won the election, didn't get an overall majority, so that means almost anything that anybody's upset about can actually cause a problem for the government. Fact of life. Brexit is just one. It's a very big issue, but it's one of those. There's been other issues, and there will be other issues following through.
This is an issue that matters very deeply to you, whether or not we're in our customs union with the EU.
There's lots of things that matter very deeply to me, beyond Brexit as well, but certainly, yes, I do. And I think that the key thing is not really what even I believe. It's the Prime Minister has been pretty clear about this from the word go, way before the election, during the election, really importantly, and even subsequently. She's made it very clear that we're, she says, taking back control, leaving the customs union, single market, and at the same time making sure that we get outside of the remit of the Court of Justice. Now, she's been clear about that.
Yes, so let's unpick a little bit of that, because in her Lancaster House speech, she said, I do want us to have a customs agreement with the EU. Not a customs union, but a customs agreement with the EU. And this controversial amendment that Anna Soubry and others have put down says they want an agreement which enables the UK to participate in a customs union with the EU. Is there really much space between those two objectives?
Well, like everything else, it depends on what the detail is. But the reality is the government set its heart, quite rightly, on having a proper free trade arrangement. Now, of course, you can describe a free trade arrangement in all sorts of different ways, but a free trade arrangement is about us having a clear ability to sell our goods in to the European Union and them to sell us without any artificial tariff barriers between the two of us, and that will require, obviously, arrangements that are customs arrangements. The big difference, though, behind having a customs union and being outside with a free trade arrangement is that we are then free to make trade arrangements with America, Australia, India, wherever we want to do, where 90%, by the way, of the growth is in the global economy in the next few years, we'll be free to do that. If we're in a customs union, you agree not to do that, and therefore we'd have to listen to what the European Union says, and we would almost certainly be outvoted endlessly. So this is about where does the power lie to make those agreements.
So, and I want to get into the detail on free trade deals with the rest of the world with you in a second, but exactly what you've described, a free trade arrangement with no tariffs with the EU and the freedom to make those deals, that's what the EU call cherry-picking, isn't it?
No, they don't, actually. I think what they would really call cherry-picking is this arrangement that we're talking about now, a customs union. I think they've been pretty clear about this. I think Barnier and the others have said this is not acceptable. Now, let's look at it from the European Union standpoint. We constantly look at what the UK wants. The European Union is almost certainly not going to agree to us to go into a customs union where we will then have equal power over any future agreement. So we will outvote all 27 because we will be a co-partner.
Well, that would depend on what the agreement was.
No, but if the European Union wants to make an agreement with somebody, as a co-partner, we would have enormous power against them. They're not going to agree to that because it's not in their interest to do so. I think what's much more in their interest, and I'm certain they've said this time and again, is they do want to have a free trade arrangement. There are lots of countries that are already now breaking ranks with the Commission about this. Italy's done it, Sweden, Holland said we have to have a free trade arrangement. They are not on that yet. They are still on the implementation phase. When it comes to free trade, I am very, very certain that they will want to make an arrangement with us because it's in their interest, arguably more than us. It's worth remembering two things that are really important.
Well, let's move on to trade with the rest of the world. Why are you so absolutely convinced that the ability to do different deals with Australia, China, the USA, different from the ones that the EU has at the moment, are so terribly important? Why can't we be increasing our trade with these countries from inside the EU? What's stopping us from doing that?
Well, the biggest problem is that we are naturally, I think, the UK, more than almost any other country in the European Union, arguably more than most in the world, a free trading nation. We believe in the concept of free trade. The World Trading Organization has already said they love the idea of us coming back as a full voting member because we will argue for free trade. And by the way, global free trade and services, which has stalled because the European Union has not wanted to push this item at all.
So why then does Germany do so much more trade with China than we do from inside the EU?
Yeah, well, that's nothing to do with whether it has a free trade. That's to do with what Germany says they want to do and go and do it. And we have to get our exporters.
But it's clear that being a member of the EU hasn't prevented them from doing far more trade in goods and services with China than we do. So why do we have to be outside the EU to do that?
That's not the parallel argument. The reality is that by getting trade arrangements, you get rid of artificial tariff barriers and delays at those borders. That allows you to increase your trade. We want to increase our trade from where we are, but at the same time, by the way, incoming stuff is just as important. Now, the people that will benefit most from a free trade arrangement are the poorest in society, because the cost of food, of footwear, of clothing, they're almost certainly going to fall. And they're the people that will benefit enormously.
Assuming it's a favourable free trade agreement that we were to do with, say, for instance, China, why would they do a better deal with the UK, a much smaller market, than they would be prepared to do with the EU, which is a much larger and therefore more important market for them?
Well, we always talk about this large market. The scale actually isn't that important. The key thing is, do you value a marketplace? Is it worth doing business with? Financial services, for example, is a really important area you want to strike agreements about, because the UK is dominant in financial services, and we can't even get a free trade arrangement within the single market at the moment. You can't sell insurance into Germany without having a company in Germany to sell that. They've never wanted to do free trade on financial services. So the idea is, by liberating up these markets, by the way, we believe in it globally, we'll be in a much better state. You've seen, for example, the increase in New Zealand's trade when they went for free trade, when they got rid of their trade barriers, a dramatic increase in their global position, dramatic increase in their trade.
The Treasury have modelled this. The Treasury looked at this and they reckoned that a free trade deal with America would add 0.2% to the UK's GDP.
Nonsense.
A deal with China, India, Australia and the Gulf states put together, maximum of 0.4%.
Well, I have a bone to pick with the BBC, by the way. There has been a brilliant economist report, independent economist report this week, which has been given very little coverage to, which has taken apart the model, by the way, that the Treasury and the government put together. For example, dealing with this, the reason why you arrive at that, it depends on what you assume to be the actual savings on the border. The government has only assumed a 4% saving on getting rid of tariff barriers. In fact, almost every economist in the world agrees it's nearer to 20% saving. So as a result of that...
this study has been covered in the BBC. It was on the Daily Politics on Friday. I've had a good look at it, and it assumes zero tariffs on absolutely everything. It's an extremely optimistic forecast.
Hold on. It assumes a 10% tariff at the end of the day. It assumes tariffs falling to an average of 10%, not zero. They could go to zero very happily, which would improve it even more. I know this because I've read this report backwards. An absolutely brilliant report. And the key point they're making...
One of the authors of it, Patrick Minford, though, says that whilst there will be benefits, he argues, from free trade deals, over time it would be likely we would mostly eliminate manufacturing in the UK, but he thinks that would be worth it and it shouldn't
That was on Patrick Minford's original suggestions much earlier. This is a very different report.
But he was one of the authors of this report.
He was, but he has accepted that that is not going to be the case within this report. They're assuming only that the border changes will mean a less of a tariff, that is to say, at the borders on average, which is about right, because that's what happens in most other free trade arrangements. And the point I'm simply making is it has a massive benefit to the UK for us to do this. That's why going for a free trade arrangement with the European Union is the right way to go. And, you know, we do forget all the time what Europe itself wants. There's arrogance. I think Labour's in a complete mess about this. They went round.
We're going to talk to them about that.
They went round the election telling all those seats that voted to leave that they were in favour of leaving the customs union and the single market. And Barry Gardiner said it was making you a vassal state if you stayed in the customs union.
We'll ask Labour themselves about their position in the customs union.
Theresa May has made it very clear we're out of the single market, out of the customs union. And I say to my colleagues, by the way, who might change some of this, I say just be very careful on this one, because you're being invited into a Labour Party tactical game which will actually end up in real damage to the United Kingdom.
Ian Duncan Smith, thank you very much for talking to us.